What is happening here? What is happening in this video? There are so many math books here in this room. From the floor to the ceiling. It is completely ridiculous. We have almost 8 feet of math books stacked from the floor to the ceiling. It's completely insane. There are math books for beginners. There are math books for experts. There are cheap math books that are super affordable. There are rare math books that are really expensive. In fact, one of these is worth over $1,000. There is even a math book here that is the only one on the internet. That's right. I looked online and I could not find another copy of this book. And it was written by a famous mathematician. There are math books in this pile from the 1800s. There are math books from the 1900s and math books from the 2000s. In this video, we're going to go over every single one of these math books. If you're interested in any of these books, check the description and I will try to leave links to all of these books. This is a book of abstract algebra by Charles Pinter. I used to have a friend who was a really cool guy and he always talked about this book. This was his favorite book. I finally got this book and I've just started reading it. Notice it says examination copy, not for sale. This book is on topology and it's by Wolfgang Franz, and I've read decent amounts of this book and I think it's pretty good. Professor of Mathematics, University of Frankfurt, Maine. Let me just show you a brief look at the contents here so you can see what's covered in this book. And again, I've read portions of it and I liked it. Very, very different from modern textbooks. This is a book on functional analysis, and this one is a lot more advanced than a lot of the other books that you saw on the stack. It's by Bachmann and Narici, and here's a look at the table of contents for this book. It's a pretty good book on functional analysis, and honestly, it's a very well-made book. I mean, just gotta give it a whiff. It smells really, really good, really thick book, and it's quite affordable. Yeah, pretty cool. This is a book that is a classic in mathematical statistics. This one is called A First Course in Mathematical Statistics, and it's by Wedderburn. It's from 1946. This is an older book on statistics that gives you a different viewpoint of the subject. This is good for anyone who wants to learn statistics in a more rigorous fashion. Probability and Theory of Errors by Woodard. This book is super thin, and it is intentionally thin. So the goal of this book, according to the author, is to introduce students to more advanced topics. Really quite an interesting book, and you don't see books like this too much anymore. Here's a quick look at the table of contents, and it's intentionally small so that you can read it and get through it and hopefully absorb some of the material. Pretty cool little book. This is a book that I've actually had for several years. This one is called Vector Analysis, and it's by J.G. Coffin. And it's got all kinds of topics that are really prevalent in mathematical physics. So it's got a lot of applied math in it. So if you're going into applied mathematics and you're looking for a book that has a lot of applied mathematics, this is a pretty good choice. Yeah, I like this little book. It's pretty cool, and I'm pretty sure it's out of print, but if I can find it, I'll leave a link in the description. This is a book that I actually used for a course in graduate school. It's Introductory Functional Analysis with Applications by Kreisig, and this is the International Student Edition, so I think this is a great book. I have read big portions of this book, and I have done a lot of the exercises. As you can see here, I did number 1, number 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, and 15. So I've done all of these problems, and I've read quite a few sections. So really great book. Probably the best book for beginners on the subject of functional analysis. This one is an absolute classic. This is Set Theory by the legendary Felix Hausdorff. That's right. This is the same person after which Hausdorff spaces were named after. And apparently this was from the library of Alan B. and I can't make out that name. So this is pretty much the book on set theory. This is like the first real book that became popular that really talked about set theory in a very comprehensive way. And I think it's worth owning if you're a collector of books, and you can read this and actually learn some math. I think this is probably the best book for learning advanced calculus, and it's not a beginner book. It's more of like an intermediate / advanced calculus book, but it's still great for beginners. I have read big portions of this book, and I've done tons of the exercises. I still think it's a must-have for anyone who wants to learn undergraduate real analysis, aka advanced calculus. It's a great book and it's the one by Buck. This is an old school text on differential equations, so if you're taking differential equations in college now, or you want to learn differential equations, this is the one by Boyce and DePrima, and it's a book that was used a lot in the past in college courses. It's still used, but there's a lot of other modern books that are now used instead of this one. But it gives you a really nice treatment of the subject and worth picking up, I think, because it has good explanations and good examples. This is a really interesting book that I bought because someone left a comment in one of the videos. It's called The Language of Mathematics by Frank Land. And let me just show you the table of contents briefly so you can see what is covered in this book. So a lot of random topics, and I think it's a very readable book. Most people can pick up this book and start reading it. So the prereqs for this book are very low, so it makes it a really interesting choice for someone who's looking for a readable math book. This book used to belong to Phil, apparently, and the book is called Advanced Calculus and is by Kaplan. This is a big, thick advanced calculus book with tons of topics. It's probably super affordable because it's not very popular and worth picking up if you're looking for more resources and exercises on advanced calculus. It does have answers to some of the exercises, but not all, which is typical of advanced calculus book. Here we have a classic in topology. This is Topology by Mendelssohn. This is a great book for beginners who want to learn topology. And you can see it was owned and cherished in that order by N. Lincoln, fall 1969. Great book on topology, covers everything in a very standard fashion, and worth having if you're trying to learn topology. A classic book by the legendary Paul Halmos. It's called Naive Set Theory. This is a very, very readable book on the study of sets, and probably one of the most famous books on set theory, except perhaps the book by Hausdorff. This book is actually based on a lot of the work that Felix Hausdorff did. So a much more readable treatment than Hausdorff's set theory. So I think this is a much better book for beginners who are looking to get into the field of set theory. Here we have Complex Variables by George Paglia and Gordon Lotta, and this is a book on complex variables. It's intended for undergraduates and it covers the material in a very rigorous fashion. This is the same Paglia who wrote the book How to Prove It, which I made a video about, which is also a book that is a must-have, I think, for anyone who is into problem solving. But I like this book a lot. It's a nice book, it's affordable, and it's a good resource for complex variables. Here we have a book which has a title which kind of tells you that it's intended for people who are going to graduate school, but I really think this is a book for anyone who wants to learn math. This is an excellent book, and I had the pleasure of actually interviewing the author, Thomas Garrity, in a YouTube video I made, so I was so fortunate to interview him and talk about this book. This book is great because it talks about all of the different areas of mathematics, and it gives you like a general overview. So you can read this book and you can learn about the different fields of mathematics. I think this is one of those books that's just great because it shows you all the different types of math. Yeah, you're not going to become an expert at any particular thing by reading this book, but it will kind of open your eyes to all the math that's out there. There's also a newer edition to this book, which I'll try to leave a link in the description in case you want to check it out. This is a book that I bought because someone left a comment in one of the videos, and I'm really happy I did. I've done several of the problems from this book. I've worked through several of the examples. I think it's a great book on how to write proofs. It's called Foundations of Higher Math, and it's by Fletcher and Patty. There's tons of good books on how to write proofs, and as a collector of books, I think it's good to have all of them. And this one is up there. I think it's one of the better ones. Question I often get is, what is a good book to learn vector calculus from? This is one. This is the one by Thomas Barr, and I bought this because someone said it was a good book, and I thought, let me pick it up. So I picked it up. I read a couple of the sections and I've done a couple of the problems. And I think it's a pretty good book for learning vector calculus. At the same time, you can learn a lot of this math by reading other books like the ones by Stewart, Larson, or Thomas Calculus. Nevertheless, it's kind of fun to have an entire book dedicated to vector calculus. It's pretty cool. This is a classic and widely popular book on how to read and do proofs. This is by Solo. This is a must-have for anyone trying to learn proofs. There's tons of good proof books, and a lot of people swear that this is the best one. There are so many people who leave comments about this book, and they claim that this is the best book for learning to write proofs. So I think it's worth picking up if you're trying to learn proofs. Probably the most comprehensive book ever written on the study of abstract algebra. This is Serge Lang's Algebra. I love this book. I think this book is incredible, and I bought my copy brand new. I'm a big fan of used books, but I bought this one new because I had recently purchased another used book and it was falling apart, and I didn't want to have that same experience. So I splurged a little bit and spent more money on this book. Let me just show you the contents briefly so you can see. So group starts on page 3 and ends on page 83. So look at that, just not many pages, and he covers all of group theory. Then he covers rings. Then he goes to modules, polynomials. Then he talks about algebraic extensions, Galwa theory, extensions of rings, transcendental extensions, algebraic spaces, Noetherian rings and modules, real fields, absolute values. And then part 3 is on linear algebra and representations. So much mathematics in this book. There's a lot of subjects in abstract algebra that you'll only find in a book like this. So I think it's like a must-have for anyone who is serious about learning some abstract algebra. This book is called Introductory Mathematical Analysis, but it's actually not a book on mathematical analysis. Let me just show you the contents in reverse order really quickly. So linear algebra, matrix algebra, probability, multivariable calculus, methods and applications of integration, some integration, more applications of differentiation, exponential and logarithmic functions, mathematics of finance, limits and continuity, differentiation, and then some more basic math like lines, parabolas, systems, graphs, functions, applications of equations and inequalities, and just an algebra refresher. So really interesting book, and does have answers to the odd-numbered problems. I think it's a pretty cool book that kind of just gives you like a survey of math and throws in a bunch of calculus. This is a solid book for learning algebra and trig. Great for beginners, super thick, super heavy. It's just so heavy for how thick it is. It's by Michael Sullivan, and it's just a standard text that covers pretty much all the algebra and trig you need to know if you want to go further and take a course like calculus. Perfect for self-study, great examples, great exercises. I highly recommend this book to anyone who wants to learn algebra and or trig. This is a linear algebra book for math majors, and you've probably never heard of this book, but it's written for math majors who are taking like an honors course in linear algebra, and it's by Mirsky, and it's quite rigorous, and it's got a lot of good computational examples. It's one of those strange, unknown books that you've probably never heard of, and I think it's worth picking up. Oh, I just gotta smell it. Oh, it smells so good. If you're looking for a book that's comprehensive and covers a lot of topics in linear algebra. Yeah, it's a pretty cool book. This is a book that I absolutely love, and it's called Integral Calculus, and it's by H.B. Phillips. H.B. Phillips was a mathematician, and he was actually head of the math department at MIT. And this book is especially cool because it has answers to all of the exercises. So you get answers to all of the problems in the back of the book, which is super rare for any math book, and even more rare for a book from this era. So pretty much every problem has an answer, and that's awesome. And it's a book on calculus. So basically it's all integration. Let me show you where the book starts. This book is from 1917, by the way. So integration, formulas and methods of integration, definite integrals, simple areas, and there you can read the rest. So really fun book. If you can find it, it's pretty rare. It's by Phillips. A wonderful book by John Courant and Fritz John. This is Introduction to Calculus and Analysis, Volume 1. And this is a great book. It's a classic on the analysis. Many people know of this book because it's so famous. I am lucky that my copy is in such good condition. I'm just going to give it a whiff. Yeah, really nice. Just another advanced calculus, aka analysis book from the past, written by two legendary authors. Here's a book that you can get really inexpensively, and I'm pretty sure it's still being reprinted today. It's the one and only Calculus Made Easy by Sylvanus Thompson, and this book is completely different from every other calculus book in existence because it's written in a different way. It's kind of written for like the everyday person. It's not really written like a math book. So Thompson tries to explain calculus to everyone with this classic text, and it's been a success because it's still in print today. So if you're looking for a very readable book on calculus, this is a good choice. Now, I don't think this book alone is enough to learn calculus. You should try to get other textbooks that have lots of exercises for practice. but it's certainly a book that's going to give you a different perspective on the subject. I've done a lot of the exercises from this book for fun. It's called Introduction to Ordinary Differential Equations, and it's by Ross. I like this book, and I refer to it from time to time when I'm just looking for some random problems to do for fun. It's just a standard text on differential equations, and I think it'd be a good supplement to a course. So if you're taking a course on DE, a lot of these topics are covered in your DE course. In fact, pretty much every topic you cover in a modern DE course in college today is going to be in this book. This is probably the most popular rigorous linear algebra book used in the 60s. It's Hoffman and Kunz. So this is like the 1960s version of Friedberg's linear algebra today. That's the more modern book. This is a great book though, great for learning linear algebra. It's proof-based linear algebra. So it's a good book if you want to like learn linear algebra in a more rigorous fashion. Reads really well, and it's probably fairly inexpensive to pick up because you can probably find an older edition. This is absolutely my #1 pick for learning complex variables for beginners. It's called Fundamentals of Complex Analysis, and it's by Saff and Snyder, and it is worth the money in my opinion. I don't know if this book is still really affordable, but it's worth getting because you're going to get great explanations. Another really good comparable book is the one by Brown and Churchill, but I have worked through this book extensively. Looks like I did 1A. I just opened it to a random page and you can see a lot of the problems are circled. That means that I have done all of these problems. So yeah, great textbook. I've read most of this book. I've done, you can see a ton of the problems. Look at all of these are circled here too. So big fan of this text. And this is the book that I use to learn complex variables. So great book for beginners. Again, it's my #1 pick currently for learning complex analysis. All you need for this book, by the way, is just some calculus. So if you know partial derivatives and integrals, you can jump into this book and you can begin learning this wonderful subject. Graph theory is not a topic that I discuss often here on the channel, but this is one of my graph theory books. It's by Ronald Gould, and the entire book is on graph theory. So it's intended for beginners, but I still think it's pretty tough. But you can sit down, read through it, and try to learn some graph theory. So if you're looking for a graph theory book, it's definitely one to consider. This is an interesting book because it's an abstract algebra book for beginners, but it has kind of like unique topics. Also, the order of the topics is a little bit different than what you would see in other abstract algebra books. I've mainly used this book as a reference and as a study guide when trying to seek out additional practice problems to sharpen my proofwriting skills. But yeah, pretty cool book on abstract algebra. It's got a whole section on symmetry, which I thought was kind of cool. And yeah, just some unique topics that you won't see in other books. This is a geometry book used to teach math to high school students, and it's probably one of the most popular geometry books ever written. It's just super widely used. It's by Jurgensen, Brown, and King, and even on the inside of my copy, you can see it was used at Bay High School. I don't know where that is, but some high school students must have used this book in the past. You can see here it covers the basics of geometry, and I would say it's a pretty good book for learning geometry. It's probably why it's so popular. My copy is pretty old, but I'm pretty sure there's newer editions available, so it's worth picking up if you can find a copy. This is a very different book on differential equations. It's not like the other books that are really popular. This is the one by Borelli and Coleman, and I've done some exercises from this book and I've read small portions of some of the sections. It's just a different approach to differential equations and explains things that you won't see in other DE books. Let me just briefly show you the contents so you can see what's covered in this textbook. Starts off with first order differential equations, then it goes on to initial value problems and their approximate solutions, so an entire chapter on that. Then it goes over second order DEs, and then I'll just pan through this pretty quickly. You can see it talks about Laplace transforms, systems, an entire chapter on stability, so things you don't typically see in regular popular differential equations books. This is a book that I bought for a class, and then right before the class started, they changed the book. So I got stuck with this book, and I'm really happy I did. It's called Advanced Calculus, and it's by Taylor and Mann. It's got a lot of really good explanations and a lot of really good examples and exercises. It's a great book if you're trying to learn advanced calculus. This is a modern textbook on very basic algebra. So if you're just getting started with math and you really know very little, this is the kind of book you would want. It's called Elementary Algebra by Sullivan, and this is the instructor's copy, but you can just get any edition and any copy. and you should be good. So great book for learning like very, very basic mathematics. And this is Abstract Algebra by Dummett and Foote. This is an incredible book for learning abstract algebra. This is intended to be a graduate level textbook, but you can use it as a beginner. However, if you're just starting with abstract algebra, I would recommend other beginner-friendly books like the ones by Saracino, Gallian, or Frelay. But this one has more content than any of those books, and it's worth owning. So if you can get a copy at a good price, I think you should pick it up. My copy I bought used, and it does have some damage and some of the pages are coming out. So I wish I would have purchased a newer copy of this book. Abstract Algebra, an Introduction by Hungerford. So this is his intro book. He has another book which is much more advanced and honestly a better book than this one, but this one is intended for beginners, so it's better for beginners than his other more advanced book on abstract algebra. It's a great book for beginners. I like it. I've done some of the exercises, and I think it's a pretty good choice if you're trying to learn abstract algebra. This is one of Terence Tao's books. That's right, the one and only Terence Tao. This is Analysis 2, and I actually have Analysis 1 as well. This is a very nice book on analysis because it's written by Terence Tao, so you're going to get different explanations than what you would normally see in other analysis books. This is a legendary book. This is Algebra by Michael Arton. He is the son of Emil Arton, who was also a mathematician, and this is the Eastern Economy edition. This book is not super inexpensive, so it does cost some money, but you're gonna get an amazing book. It reads very differently from other abstract algebra books, and the exercises are pretty challenging. He's got some easier ones in here, but the exercises themselves can be quite challenging. I think this is a great book for learning abstract algebra. As far as a reference, I do think a book like Dummett and Foote is a better reference, but in any case, it's a book worth owning for anyone serious about abstract algebra. It's a classic. This is a book that I've actually used to teach differential equations. It's the one by Zill, so I've read big portions of this book, and I've done most of the exercises in this book. I think it's a pretty good book for beginners, and I really like it because it has lots of exercises and decent explanations. It's certainly a contender if you're trying to teach yourself differential equations. Here's a book on differential geometry. This is the one by Grosstein, and it's intended for beginners, and the only thing you really need to read this book is some calculus. So if you know a lot of calculus, you know, both single and multivariable, you can pick up this book and start your journey into the world of differential geometry. It looks like this legendary book made it to the stack of books. This is the one and only Calculus by Michael Spivak. I bought my copy brand new and I baby this book. I'm always really, really careful when I read it and when I open it. I don't write in it, probably because I bought it brand new and it does cost, you know, some money. It's not super inexpensive. So worth having if you want to learn some calculus. There is no book like this on calculus in existence. No book is written in this way. Just incredible explanations and notoriously difficult exercises. The exercises in this book are completely insane and they will stump even the best calculus students. This is College Algebra by Coburn, and this is a pretty standard book on college algebra. So this just basically has algebra in it. So after reading a book like this and working through several of the problems, in theory, you should be ready for a course on calculus. So good for beginners and good for people who already know some algebra. What a cool looking book. This is Galwa Theory by Emil Arton. He is the father of Michael Arton. And this little book is based on his lectures that he gave at the University of Notre Dame. And this is a very readable treatment of Galois theory. Now, one thing I noticed when reading this book is that a lot of the definitions are outdated, but that's something you get with a lot of books. And it's still worth reading because you'll learn some stuff. You'll see explanations that you don't see in other books. I believe this is a Dover book, so you can get it for just a few dollars on the internet. And I'll try to leave a link in the description. Here we have a book that's good for beginners who are trying to learn statistics. This is Elementary Statistics by Weiss, and pretty decent book, very standard, very comparable to the book by Triola. So if you're taking stats and you want an actual textbook, this one's a pretty good option. This is an extremely advanced book on ring theory. I'm going to open it up so you can see it. So not for beginners. This is Ring Theory, edited by Robert Gordon, and this is proceedings of a conference on ring theory held in Park City, Utah, March 2nd through 6th in 1971. So it basically goes over some of the things discussed at that conference. So it's all very, very, very advanced mathematics. So not for beginners. Yeah, really interesting book. This book is super thick. This is one of those thick algebra books, but it's not only algebra, it's Algebra and Trigonometry, and this is the one by Forster. Great book for self-study, great book to supplement what you're learning. This is the kind of book that you work and read through prior to taking calculus. So it teaches you all the algebra and trig you need and prepares you for a course in calc. Here's a book that I've used to actually teach Calculus 1, Calculus 2, and Calculus 3, and I've done a ton of problems from this book. This is Calculus by Larson. I think this is a great book for beginners and a great book for anyone who does any kind of math. It's always good to have, a thick calculus book, and this one is perfect. This is a really fun book on calculus that you can use to learn calculus by yourself or to supplement your current calculus book. It's Calculus with Analytic Geometry. It's the one by Ellis and Gulick, and you can learn Calc 1, Calc 2, and Calc 3 from a book like this. Really interesting book with problems that you don't normally see in other books. So nice and thick. It's got all the standard stuff that you would expect to see in a calculus book. This is a book that's often used to teach liberal arts type math courses. This is Mathematical Ideas, and it's got all kinds of strange math that you don't normally find in other math books. So if you're taking some type of math course for liberal arts majors, or you're looking to learn math that is really not that advanced, but also kind of interesting, I think this one's a pretty good choice. It talks about problem solving, set theory, logic, even has some number theory. I'll just show you some of the topics here. Geometry, trig. So it's just got like a wide range of topics in math, but none of it is too difficult, and it's all written at the beginner level. So kind of a fun book that you can use to explore different math topics. One of my Shams books managed to make it to the pile. This is the book on geometry, and it's a great resource for everyone who studies math because you never know when you need a geometry reference, and this is a great reference. Like most Shams, it's got tons of examples, tons of content, and tons of solved problems. This is a fairly popular calculus book. It's Calculus Early Transcendentals, and this is the one by Briggs, Cochrane, Gillette, and Schultz. One of those thick calculus books, very comparable to the ones by Stewart and Larson. Pretty good book. It's a modern book, so you're going to get lots of cool diagrams and cool graphs and great exercises. This is by the legendary Louis Lighthold, College Algebra and Trigonometry. So Louis Lighthold was a legendary mathematics teacher, and he was a huge influence on Jaime Escalante, who was portrayed in a movie from the 80s called Stand and Deliver. And that's a great math movie. And this is the guy who influenced the real Jaime Escalante. So great book for learning algebra and trig. He's also got a fantastic calculus book and also an intermediate algebra book. Very, very good for beginners. Very nicely laid out. This is just a great book. This is a great beginner book on linear algebra. This is Linear Algebra Theory and Applications by Shanae and Kinkade. And this one's really thick. If you look at other linear algebra books, you'll notice they're not as thick as this one. This one's got tons of examples, tons of exercises, a good layout. It's got some proofs. It's got a lot of computational stuff. It's just a really solid book on linear algebra. I'm not sure how popular this book is, but it's a great book to learn linear algebra from. This is actually a book I've had for a very long time. It's called Advanced Algebra, and the entire book is on algebra. Let me just briefly show you the contents. It's a really thick algebra book, probably the thickest I have on basic algebra. So you can see there some of the topics. It's just really basic math, really basic algebra. It starts from the very beginning. Great for beginners. And I would say it's a little bit easier to read than your typical college algebra book. So yeah, really good book to learn basic algebra from. This is a legendary algebra book. It's called Higher Algebra. It's by Hall and Knight. And this is my copy of this book. Smells really, really good. And this book has pretty much answers to almost every single problem, and it covers tons of algebra. It's a really interesting book because it's not like the modern books. It's a very, very old book, and you're going to get a different treatment of algebra. So I think this is one worth picking up. You can probably get it really inexpensively, and it's really small, so you can carry it around with you. Kind of a fun little book on algebra, old school book on algebra, Higher Algebra by Hall and Knight. Probably the most popular calculus book in the entire world, Calculus by James Stewart. So many schools and colleges, at least in the US and Canada, use this book, and probably in other countries as well, I'm sure. It's just extremely popular and extremely well known. And it's just a good book, right? It's got lots of great examples, lots of exercises. It's not perfect because, no math book is really, really perfect, but it's pretty close, and you can learn a lot of math from this book. And, you buy it, you keep it, and you have it for the rest of your life. I think everyone should own a copy of Stewart. This is Apostle's book on analysis. So this is not his calculus book. This is his analysis book. So it's a lot more advanced than his calculus book. A modern approach to advanced calculus by Tom M. Apostle. This is a pretty hardcore book on mathematical analysis. I'll just give you a brief look here at the topic so you can see. Covers everything in a very rigorous fashion and a very elegant fashion. I believe this book is a lot less expensive than his calculus book. His calculus book is very, very expensive. It's very hard to find an inexpensive copy, whereas this one you should be able to find a copy for a lot less. So great book for learning analysis if you want to get a look at what Apostle is like. This is a good choice. It's his analysis book. This book is so famous it has a nickname. People call it Papa Rudin. This is graduate level real and complex analysis, and it's a classic, right? This is one of those books that is known in the world as being a legendary book. Real and Complex Analysis, Walter Rudin, Professor of Mathematics, University of Wisconsin. Yeah, 1966. Great book on measure theory and analysis. Very, very tough read, but it's a good book to have. And honestly, when you're learning a subject like real analysis, you want to have as many resources as possible. This is the answer book for Michael Spivak's calculus. That's right, you can actually buy a book that has answers to the problems in the book. And this is very useful. Now, this doesn't have answers to all of the problems. And the reason is the actual book by Michael Spivak has answers to problems as well. So this kind of has like answers to the other problems that you don't find already in the Spivak book. Great book and worth every penny if you're actually trying to work through the exercises in the book by Michael Spivak, because this one has all of the answers. I mean, super, super useful. This is Calculus Part 2 by Morris Klein, and this one starts with Chapter 18. Let me just show you the topics. And it's a very beautifully written book, very well written, very elegant, and just a nice book on calculus. So perfect for anyone who wants a different take on the subject. This is a really fun book because it's really old and it's on trigonometry, plain trigonometry with tables by Richard Heinemann. And it's meant for beginners, and it's got tons of exercises. And it's just a good way to learn some more trig. This little book is really hardcore. It's called Differential Calculus. It's by Williamson. This book is from 1893. It's got a lot of really hardcore topics, and it smells amazing. So it's basically a calculus book, but it's quite rigorous, and it's got tons of examples. Worth picking up if you can find a copy. Here we have a book that is really good for beginners who want to learn number theory. This is Number Theory by Long, and I'm pretty sure this book is still in print, so you can still find it. I think it's a great book for beginners. I've done a lot of the exercises, and I enjoyed this book quite a bit. I think it's great. I'm just going to give it a whiff. Smells amazing, and I'll try to leave a link in the description to this one because I'm pretty sure it's still out there. Great for beginners, not a thick book at all, so really thin. This is Complex Variables by Robert Ashe. This is a beginner level book on complex variables. Wonderful little book from the past. It has everything you need in order to learn complex variables. So I like this book a lot, and I think it's worth picking up. This is a very fun little book. It's called Vector Methods, and it's got a bunch of really cool topics. It's to Alan Young, 20th January 1947. I wonder who that was. And it's got all kinds of cool topics. Let me just show you the contents really quick. Vector algebra, differential geometry, applications to mechanics, the vector operator, potential theory, hydrodynamics, Laplace's equation, and four-dimensional vectors. Just kind of a fun little old book that you can pick up and read and learn some really interesting mathematics. One of my favorite authors, Serge, has written this book. It's called Algebraic Structures. I love how clean the writing is in Lang's books. He doesn't waste any time, and he just jumps from topic to topic, from proof to proof, and concept to concept. I love the way his books are written. It's just really nice. Lang has written tons of books, and they're all really good, I think. And this is his one on abstract algebra. It's for beginners, and it's called Algebraic Structures. A solid book on introductory real analysis. This is the one by Michael Schramm, and I've read small portions of this book, and I've done a couple of the exercises, and I think it's a pretty good choice to supplement your current real analysis book. Here's a book I'm actually currently reading. It's called Vector Analysis, and it's by H.B. Phillips. So I've been reading this book very, very recently. Here's an example of where he talks about the addition of vectors via the parallelogram law, and he gives you some more pictures here. So he just goes through and explains everything the best he can. And H.B. Phillips was the head of the math department at MIT, actually. So yeah, kind of an unknown author perhaps. And this book is pretty hard to find, so if I can find it, I'll leave a link in the description. I got this book at an unbelievable discount. There was an error, I believe, on Amazon when I bought this book. I ended up paying like less than $10 for it. So pretty happy with this book. I had a former professor who I worked with who recommended this book when I was trying to learn commutative algebra. And this book is very different from other abstract algebra books because the proofs are super detailed. As you can see here, it goes through and just gives all of the details. And it's got a lot of exercises, a lot of problems that you wouldn't see in other abstract algebra books. So yeah, definitely a different approach to the subject. This book was actually a gift. Someone actually just gave me this book, and I believe that they used this book when they were in college. It's called Plain Trigonometry. So this is just an older book on trigonometry. I wouldn't say there's anything really special about it other than it's very different from the modern books on trig. I mean, the entire book is dedicated to trigonometry, so kind of different from what you see today. Pretty good book for learning some trig. This is Linear Algebra by Larry Smith, and this is a great book on linear algebra. The only thing I don't like about this book is that my copy is falling apart. So other than that, this is a great book for learning linear algebra. It's got proofs, it's got computations. It's a pretty solid book. I actually use this book for a class in graduate school. It's called Complex Variables, and it's by Ablowitz and Focus. And great book. My biggest complaint with this book is that it's hard to keep it open, although it stayed open that time. But it's got a lot of complex analysis in it, and this has way more topics than your typical complex variables books. So it's going to have a lot of advanced stuff in it. So if you're looking for a book that has the beginner level stuff and more advanced stuff, this is a pretty good choice. Here's a book I've actually used to teach pre-calculus, to teach trigonometry, and to teach the combined course pre-calc/trig. So great book. I've done tons of problems from this book, and I've read big portions of this book. This is probably one of the better books out there for learning algebra and trigonometry. This is the one by Hornsby, Lyle, and Roxwold. I have a weird love-hate relationship with this book because I've spent a lot of time reading this book and a lot of time working through the exercises in this book. Overall, I would say it's a pretty decent book for learning partial differential equations, but you probably want to get more books on the subject if you're really trying to learn it. So I used this book for a course long ago as an undergraduate, and it was a course on boundary value problems, which basically is just partial differential equations. And this book is pretty good. Some sections are better than others. The exercises are pretty good too. However, I did find some typos in some of the solutions to the exercises, and that cost me a lot of time and pain. Hence my hate of the book. But I love the book. I love the size. It's just a nice little book on partial differential equations, and it's got a lot of topics, so it's worth picking up, I think. This is a widely popular book on discrete math. People use this for courses in discrete math. Sometimes they use it for courses in combinatorics as well. And it's the one by Grimaldi. And it's a pretty good book, but it's also a pretty hard read. And discrete math is a pretty tough subject for people. So I would say it's a decent book for beginners, but you probably want to get another book as well to help supplement this one. This is Calculus and its Applications, and this is the one by Bittinger, Ellenbogen, and Sergeant. This is a pretty solid book on calculus. It's got some single variable calculus, some multivariable calculus, and some other topics as well. Let me show you some of the topics that you'll find in this book, because it does have topics that you typically don't see in other calculus books. For example, talks about systems and matrices, probability distributions, and some combinatorics and probabilities. So things that you normally wouldn't see in a calculus book, but it does have all of the other standard topics as well. So this book can sell from anywhere to maybe $500 to over $3,000. This might be the most expensive math book I own, I'm not sure. This is the book by De Morgan, and what keeps the value of my copy down is that the pages, or rather the cover, comes off. So this is the actual work by Augustus De Morgan, and it's a book on logic, so super rare. However, there are copies online, and most of them are in the $1,000 range, although I did see one currently for over $3,000. So kind of an interesting book, very, very old, very classic text. This is Advanced Calculus by Woods, and I'm pretty sure this is the only one that you can get right now, although I'm not selling it. But what I mean by that is there's no other copies on the internet. You might be able to find another copy of this book, but not this edition. This one is from 1926. Currently on the internet, I think there was one copy from 1934, but none from 26. And so this is a beautifully written advanced calculus book, and it's famous because Richard Feynman learned calculus using this book. So super rare, super famous, and super cool. It reads great. If you're looking for an advanced calculus book, if you can find it, I say buy it. But yeah, just a very, very interesting take on the subject. And here it is. I think this might be the rarest math book I own. This book here is super rare. I cannot find another copy on the internet. Cambridge Tracks in Mathematics and Mathematical Physics. This is by G.H. Hardy, and I'll just very carefully open my copy here. You see it's been taped back together. The integration of functions of a single variable. Yeah, G.H. Hardy. So Hardy is the person who invited Ramanujan to England to work. So Hardy actually worked with Ramanujan, which is really interesting. So this pamphlet is intended to be read as a supplement to the accounts of indefinite integration given in textbooks on the integral calculus. So it's basically meant to be a supplement for someone who is studying integral calculus. So pretty cool, pretty rare. And again, I have not seen any other copies of this book currently. So I'm sure there are other copies in existence, but currently, as of like right now, I could not find it on the internet. Kind of cool, kind of a rare book, just figured I would share. So that's it. We went through the pile of math books from the floor to the ceiling, and hopefully you've seen some math books that you've never heard of. Maybe you've seen subjects you've never heard of. Math books are really, really cool, and obviously I have way too many, but I love math books. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Good luck.